Every single person on Earth lives inside some kind of economic system, yet almost nobody can clearly explain the difference between capitalism, socialism, and communism when it actually matters. So let's fix that by watching the same simple village get organized 9 completely different ways. In each version, we'll ask the same 3 questions. Who owns the resources? Who decides what gets made? And who ends up with the profit? By the end, you'll be able to follow any news story about inflation, inequality, or socialism versus capitalism debates without getting lost. Let's start at the very beginning, long before coins or kings, with what's called a traditional economy. In this earliest kind of village, families and clans farm, hunt, herd, or fish, mostly for their own direct use, not to sell for profit, and they trade any surplus through simple barter, a basket of fish for a bundle of firewood. What gets produced isn't decided by prices or a government plan. It's decided by custom and tradition, following whatever their parents and grandparents did before them. There's often little or no formal money, and roles like farmer, weaver, or hunter are usually passed down within families rather than chosen freely. Ownership tends to be communal or tribal rather than tightly individual, with land and resources shared according to long-standing customs. Many indigenous and rural subsistence communities around the world still run largely on traditional economic principles today, even alongside modern markets. It's less a historical relic and more the oldest continuously running economic system on Earth. Imagine a small village 1,000 years ago, where all the farmland belongs to a lord who answers to a king. The peasants who actually work that land don't own it. They farm it in exchange for protection and a place to live, handing over a big share of their crops as rent. Nobody's asking what should we produce this year through prices or markets. The Lord basically decides, based on tradition and what the manor needs. Almost all the profit and surplus flows upward to the Lord and eventually the king, while peasants keep just enough to survive. This is feudalism, the economic backbone of medieval Europe and similar hierarchies elsewhere, where status at birth locks in your economic role for life. There's barely any buying and selling beyond the local manor. Most of the village is self-sufficient, trading directly rather than using much money. Now, fast forward to the 1500s through 1700s, when kings and queens realized trade itself could be a weapon. In this village, imagine the crown decides it should export more woven cloth than it imports of anything else, because every gold coin that leaves the country is treated like a loss. The government hands out monopolies to favored merchant companies, tells colonies what raw materials to ship home, and slaps tariffs on foreign goods to protect local producers. Profit here flows to the state treasury and a small circle of chartered trading companies, not really to individual villagers. Ownership of land and workshops is still mostly private, but the government heavily steers what gets made and traded to fatten the national purse. Mercantilism is basically capitalism, with the state gripping the steering wheel, obsessed with exporting more than it imports. Picture that same village today. But now anyone can open a shop, own their tools, and keep whatever profit they make. Nobody up top is deciding how much bread to bake. The baker just watches how many loaves sell and what price people will pay, and adjusts. If the baker guesses wrong, they lose money. If they guess right, they get rich, and that risk and reward is the whole engine. Ownership is private. Decisions are decentralized across millions of individual choices, and prices act like a constant flow of information about what people actually want. This is capitalism, the dominant system in most of the world today, from small village markets to global corporations like Apple or Toyota. Its biggest strength is efficiency and innovation driven by competition. Its biggest criticism is that it can produce large gaps between rich and poor. Now imagine the villagers vote to jointly own the grain mill, the well, and the healer's clinic. because they decide some things are too important to leave to individual profit-seeking. Under socialism, key industries and utilities are owned collectively by the state or by worker cooperatives, and decisions about what to produce factor in the whole village's needs, not just what's most profitable. Smaller shops and personal businesses might still operate for profit, so it's not necessarily an all-or-nothing system. Many socialist-leaning countries mix public ownership of big industries with private markets for everyday goods. Money made from shared enterprises and taxes gets funneled into things like free healthcare, education, or pensions for everyone in the village. You can see softer versions of this today in countries like Sweden or Norway, which keep robust capitalist markets alongside strong public ownership and generous welfare programs. The core idea is reducing inequality and making sure basic needs are met collectively, even if it means somewhat lower individual profit incentives. Push the socialist idea all the way to its extreme, and you get communism, where in theory there's no private property at all. The mill, the fields, the tools, everything belongs to the whole community together. The classic goal, described by thinkers like Karl Marx, is a stateless, classless society where people contribute what they can and take what they need, with production organized around actual human needs rather than profit or wages. In practice, every large-scale attempt at communism, like the Soviet Union or Mao's China, ended up run by a powerful one-party state that made the big economic decisions instead of the community itself. That created a command-style economy where central planners, not market prices, decided how much grain or steel the village equivalent should produce. Profit, in the capitalist sense, disappears, but so does much of the individual incentive and consumer choice that markets provide, which historically contributed to shortages and inefficiency. It's important to separate communism as a theoretical ideal from the real governments that called themselves communist, since the lived reality often diverged sharply from Marx's original vision. Let's zoom into the mechanics of that central planning idea on its own, because it's really its own system called a command economy. Here, a government planning office literally decides how many shoes, how much wheat, and how many tractors the entire village-turned-nation needs for the year, then issues orders to factories and farms to hit those targets. There's no real price signal from supply and demand. Prices are just set by bureaucrats, sometimes wildly mismatched with what people actually want or what things cost to make. This system can mobilize huge resources fast, which is why it was used for rapid industrialization in the early Soviet Union or for wartime production in many countries. But it's notoriously bad at matching supply to real demand, which is why command economies have often produced both gluts of unwanted goods and painful shortages of things people actually need. Cuba and North Korea today still run largely on this model, though most former command economies have shifted toward more market-based approaches since the late 20th century. Here's the twist. Almost every country you can actually name today, including the US, Germany, Japan, and Canada, doesn't run a pure version of any of these systems. They run a mixed economy. In our village, that means most shops, farms, and workshops are privately owned and driven by profit and prices, just like capitalism. But the village council still steps in to regulate food safety, fund a public school, tax the wealthy shopkeepers a bit more, and provide a basic safety net for anyone who falls on hard times. The government might own certain things outright, like the roads or the postal service, while leaving bakeries and blacksmiths to private hands. Deciding what to produce is mostly left to market prices, but public spending and regulation nudge things towards social goals, like clean water or public health care. This blend tries to capture capitalism's efficiency and innovation, while softening its rough edges with government-provided safety nets and rules. Because it's flexible and adaptable, the mixed economy is by far the most common real-world system on Earth right now. Now, here's a lesser-known one that specifically pushes back against both giant corporations and giant government control: Distributism. Inspired by Catholic social teaching and thinkers like G.K. Chesterton and Hilaire Belloc in the early 1900s. This system's big idea is that productive property, land, tools, workshops, should be spread as widely as possible among ordinary families, rather than concentrated in a few huge corporations or nationalized by the state. In our village, instead of one giant bakery chain owning every oven in town, Distributism wants dozens of small family bakeries, craft guilds, and worker-owned co-ops, each self-sufficient and rooted in the community. Production decisions stay local and personal, made by families and small business owners who actually live with the consequences, rather than distant shareholders or bureaucrats. Profit stays with the small owner-operators themselves, and the whole philosophy leans heavily on the idea that owning your own means of livelihood builds dignity and stability. It's never been adopted as a full national economic system anywhere, but its ideas show up today in support for credit unions, farmers markets, and worker cooperatives. So there you have it. The same little village, organized 9 completely different ways. From ancient barter and feudal lords, all the way to modern mixed economies and distributist small-town dreams. No system is perfect, which is exactly why most countries today borrow pieces from several of them at once. If this finally made capitalism, socialism, and everything in between click for you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next Every X Explained.